Story 6. The unassuming role of the royal spoon taster in Dynastic China section. 1. The imperial palate and the shadow of poison. The world of the spoon taster in the magnificent, sprawling, and often terrifying labyrinth of imperial China, where the emperor's divine mandate extended to every corner of the vast realm, and where the intricate dance of courtly life was perpetually performed on the razor's edge of ambition, loyalty, and betrayal, there existed a role of peculiar, understated, yet utterly vital significance, that of the royal spoon taster. This unassuming individual, frequently overlooked in grand historical narratives, stood, often literally, on the precipice between an emperor's life and a swift, agonizing demise. Their daily ritual, though seemingly mundane, the simple, repetitive act of tasting food, was imbued with an almost unbearable tension. A silent, solitary dance with mortality conducted not on a battlefield, but in the gilded, yet treacherous halls of the Forbidden City, or any of the sprawling imperial palaces that served as the nerve centers of mighty dynasties. From the flourishing Tang to the resplendent Ming and the final formidable Qing, to truly comprehend the profound weight of this peculiar case, we must first immerse ourselves in the very essence of the imperial world they inhabited, a realm where absolute power, once consolidated, invariably bred an equally pervasive paranoia, and where the most intimate and fundamental act of human sustenance, the daily meal, became, terrifyingly, a potential vector for insidious assassination. Imagine, if you will, the sheer, breathtaking scale of the Chinese imperial court. This was no mere ruler's residence. It was a self-contained universe, a sprawling city within a city, a meticulously planned, impossibly vast, and labyrinthine complex of interconnected palaces, serene gardens, imposing administrative buildings, sacred temples, and countless courtyards, all teeming with an astonishing population. Within these crimson walls, and beneath the golden-tiled roofs, resided thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, of individuals, the silent, omnipresent eunuchs who managed every aspect of palace life, the myriad concubines and imperial relatives, vying for influence, the erudite scholars and cunning ministers who shaped policy, the disciplined guards who enforced order, and an innumerable host of diverse servants, artisans, and specialized retainers. Every single individual, from the humblest stable boy attending to the imperial horses, to the most powerful grand counselor advising the throne, occupied a precisely defined position within a rigid, almost impenetrable, social and political hierarchy. At the very apex of this colossal human pyramid sat the Son of Heaven, the Emperor, whose authority was theoretically limitless, whose imperial decrees shaped the very fabric of life for millions across the empire, and whose very presence radiated an aura of unparalleled divine mandate and earthly power. Yet, for all his absolute power and the near deification of his status, the emperor was, paradoxically, profoundly vulnerable. His exalted, solitary position made him the ultimate prize for ambitious rivals, the target of disgruntled factions. Within the court, disillusioned former officials, or even resentful, often scheming, family members consumed by avarice or a thirst for retribution. In a political landscape where succession was often a brutal, bloody affair, where any form of dissent was ruthlessly suppressed, and where power struggles raged relentlessly beneath a meticulously cultivated veneer of courtly etiquette and performative subservience, poison emerged as a preferred, insidious, and terrifyingly effective weapon. It promised to leave no immediate trace of overt violence, required no direct confrontation, and could be delivered seemingly innocuously through the most fundamental and inescapable aspect of daily life: food. The fear was not abstract. It was a deeply ingrained, almost visceral terror born from centuries of documented palace intrigue, covert assassinations, and unexpected demises. The specter of assassination by poison was, therefore, not an occasional, concern but a persistent, chilling shadow that perpetually lingered over the imperial dining table for virtually every dynasty. It was a fear so potent that it permeated every single layer of the imperial culinary system, giving rise to an elaborate, multi-tiered security apparatus specifically designed to safeguard the emperor's meals. The food served to the Son of Heaven was not merely a matter of nourishment or culinary delight. It was a meticulously choreographed daily production, a testament to the nation's culinary artistry, a display of imperial wealth, and above all, an exercise in unparalleled, relentless security. Every bite was an affirmation of life, and every tremor of a hand could signal death. Let's delve deeper into the intricate logistics of the imperial kitchen, a vast, often secretive, and immensely powerful domain within the palace. Typically known as the Imperial Diet Office, Guanglusi during many dynasties, or similar institutions with different names depending on the era, this was not simply a collection of cooking spaces. It was a ministry unto itself, a colossal enterprise, located within the innermost sanctums of the palace, yet often navigating miles of winding corridors away from the emperor's actual private dining chambers. These kitchens were enormous operations. They housed hundreds, sometimes thousands, of specialized personnel, master cooks renowned for their skills, dedicated butchers, skilled bakers, meticulous vegetable preparers, efficient water carriers, and various highly specialized culinary artisans responsible for everything from imperial pastries to delicate teas. Each and every ingredient, from the rarest, most exotic imported spices that traveled thousands of miles along the Silk Road, to the simplest, most fundamental grains of rice and freshest vegetables, underwent multiple, rigorous inspections and re-inspections before it even reached the formidable kitchen gates. Produce might be cultivated in specially designated imperial gardens under the strictest guard. Animals raised in secure, isolated palace farms, and all external deliveries scrutinized by layers of trusted eunuchs and armed imperial guards, each with precise protocols for examination. The chain of custody was paramount, designed to be unbroken. Within the kitchen itself, the process of food preparation for the emperor was one of continuous, relentless, and layered supervision. Cooks, often chosen specifically for their loyalty, their family backgrounds, and frequently, their status as eunuchs who, having no family lineage to uphold or pass on, were theoretically less susceptible to external bribery or coercion, worked under intense, unblinking scrutiny. Ingredients designated for the emperor's personal meals were likely segregated and handled separately, perhaps in a dedicated, highly secure section of the kitchen, accessible only to the most trusted few. To further mitigate risk, multiple cooks might be involved in preparing a single dish, ensuring that no single individual had sole, unobserved access to the food during its preparation. Utensils, from the simplest ceramic bowls to the most elaborate bronze cauldrons, were rigorously cleaned, often ceremonially purified, and stored securely. The very water used for cooking, a critical component, would have been sourced from specific, guarded wells or mountain springs known for their purity, with designated eunuchs overseeing its collection and transport. The pervasive aromas emanating from these immense kitchens would have been extraordinary. The rich, deep scent of simmering broths and slow-cooked meats, the delicate fragrance of steamed vegetables and freshly baked pastries, the sharp, exotic tang of rare spices from distant lands, all mingling in a constant low hum of ceaseless culinary activity. Yet, underlying it all was the unspoken, crushing pressure of absolute perfection and, above all, unwavering, unblemished safety. Cooks literally cooked with their lives. Once the dizzying array of dishes, sometimes numbering in the dozens even for a single meal, were meticulously prepared, they embarked on their final, most perilous journey, from the heavily guarded kitchen to the emperor's private dining chamber. This was not a casual stroll by a single servant. The food was typically placed in exquisitely crafted, often heavy, lacquered boxes or covered trays made of precious woods, sometimes even jade or gold-plated bronze. Each container would then be meticulously sealed with multiple official imperial seals, wax impressions bearing the emperor's personal insignia or the mark of a supervising official. These seals were critical. An unbroken seal indicated untampered food. These precious containers would then be carried by a solemn, often silent procession of eunuchs or highly trusted palace servants, their footsteps muffled by thick palace carpets, always flanked by armed imperial guards, navigating the labyrinthine corridors and numerous heavily guarded gates of the sprawling palace complex. At each and every gate, the seals would be meticulously inspected by different levels of guards or eunuch overseers, often involving a visual check of the carriers, and sometimes even a superficial, but scrutinizing, examination of the contents. If deemed necessary, the absolute aim was to prevent any unauthorized person from tampering with the food during its transit, to thwart any attempt to introduce poison after it had left the secure confines of the kitchen. This slow, deliberate procession, the quiet shuffle of feet, the occasional soft clink of a seal being checked, the watchful eyes of the guards, this was the daily, tension-filled ritual leading up to the emperor's mealtime, a testament to the pervasive layers of protection surrounding the imperial diet. It is at the very culmination of this elaborate culinary and security journey, mere moments before the steaming dishes were formally presented to the Son of Heaven, that the royal spoon taster would enter the scene. This individual's presence was the final and arguably most critical layer of defense, the last human filter between the emperor and potential death. How, then, were such individuals chosen for a role that inherently placed them in immediate, agonizing mortal peril with every single bite? Their selection criteria were exceptionally rigorous, though often shrouded in the deep secrecy and opacity of palace politics. They were not typically high-ranking officials or members of the illustrious aristocracy. Indeed, their social status was often paradoxically low, sometimes even that of a eunuch, a trusted personal servant, or a commoner selected specifically for their perceived unwavering loyalty, their acutely honed senses, and perhaps disturbingly, their relative expendability in the grand scheme of the imperial court. This very unassuming nature, their lack of a powerful network or political ambitions, was often considered a critical part of their effectiveness. They were less likely to be compromised, easily replaced if necessary, yet absolutely essential in their specific function. Their loyalty was paramount, often secured through deep personal ties to the imperial household, the crushing fear of severe, generational punishment for any failure or disloyalty, or even, for their families, the elusive promise of a comfortable retirement and imperial favor should they serve impeccably throughout their perilous tenure. Their training, if formalized, would have been a blend of innate sensory acuity and acquired knowledge. It would have focused intensely on recognizing the most subtle changes in food appearance, smell, and taste. Any abnormal discoloration, a faint bitter or metallic aftertaste, an unusual aroma that did not fit the dish's known ingredients. They might have been familiarized with the properties of common poisons of the era, such as arsenic, which can have a garlic-like odor, mercury compounds, or various potent plant-based toxins, some of which might cause subtle reactions like a darkening of silver, though this was not foolproof and often anecdotal. They needed not only discerning palates, but far more importantly, impeccable self-control, iron nerves, and an unwavering, visceral understanding of the deadly stakes involved in every single spoonful. The spoon taster's daily routine was one of constant grinding vigilance, culminating in that terrifying moment before each imperial meal. Their living quarters would have been modest, situated within the vast palace grounds, but purposefully far removed from the opulent splendor and daily intrigues of the imperial family's living spaces. Their personal meals would have been simple, their interactions limited, their entire existence dedicated to this singular terrifying duty. The tension, though largely unspoken, would subtly build throughout the morning as the time for the imperial meal approached, a low, persistent thrum beneath the seemingly serene surface of palace life. They would position themselves strategically, either by the entrance to the emperor's dining chamber, or directly overseeing the final presentation of the dishes, their senses already on high alert, observing every nuance, every movement of the attending EUNUCHS. The sheer volume and dizzying variety of food presented to the emperor at each meal were immense, reflecting the imperial wealth and access to the empire's bounty. While grand imperial banquets could feature hundreds of distinct dishes, even a daily private meal for the emperor typically consisted of dozens of different items, an astonishing array of meticulously prepared meats, exotic vegetables, delicate grains, rich soups, intricate pastries, and rare delicacies, each crafted with painstaking care. The spoon taster faced a daunting, almost overwhelming task: to assess each and every one of these dishes, methodically, efficiently, and with absolute, unhesitating certainty. The quiet clinking of fine porcelain, the subtle shifts in the rich aromas as the steaming dishes were presented, the almost imperceptible movements of the palace staff, the hushed whispers of the eunuchs overseeing the presentation, every detail contributed to the charged, ritualistic atmosphere surrounding the imperial meal. This individual, often isolated and invisible, held the empire's fate on their tongue. The spoon taster's existence was, by its very nature, a lonely one, a solitary vigil against an invisible, insidious enemy. They rarely received grand accolades, nor did they command significant power or prestige within the court's official hierarchy. Their sole, terrifying reward was the emperor's continued life, and by extension, their own fleeting existence, perhaps the safety of their distant family. Their success was measured entirely by the absence of incident, by the quiet, uneventful continuation of the imperial meal, followed by the emperor's satisfied, unpoisoned continuation of life. Their failure, however, meant a horrific, agonizing death, not only for themselves, but potentially for their entire family line, and catastrophic chaos, political instability, and perhaps even dynastic change for the entire empire. It was a role utterly shrouded in the quiet desperation of self-preservation and the profound, crushing weight of imperial duty, a daily gamble played out with the most ordinary of objects: a porcelain spoon, a steaming bowl, and a perilous bite. The stage was set, the food prepared, the shadow of poison ever present, hovering just beyond the emperor's reach. The spoon taster's moment of silent, life or death judgment drew near with every passing minute, a testament to the hidden dangers of absolute power. What precise ritual did they follow with each spoonful, each taste? What were the truly telltale signs of a poisoned dish that they were trained to detect, beyond mere intuition? And what grim, inevitable fate awaited them should they, against all odds, fail in their unassuming, yet utterly vital task? The tension was palpable, yet largely unspoken, contained within the silent, agonizing scrutiny of a single individual's honed senses. Section 2. The Silent Judgment. The act of tasting and its immediate aftermath. Having navigated the sprawling, tension-laden expanse of the imperial palace, and understood the pervasive fear that necessitated the spoon taster's existence, we now arrive at the very heart of their perilous daily duty, the moment of silent judgment. This was the ritual itself, a precise, agonizing ballet of sensory analysis, performed under the crushing weight of ultimate responsibility. It was a moment that could determine the fate of an emperor, a dynasty, and most immediately, the life of the spoon taster themselves. Imagine the scene within the imperial dining chamber. It would be a room of immense splendor, yet, at this critical juncture, filled with an almost suffocating quiet. The air, perhaps still faintly scented with The last wisps of incense from a morning ritual would now carry the rich, complex aromas of the prepared imperial meal. Dozens of dishes, arranged with exquisite artistry, would be laid out on low, lacquered tables or intricately carved stands. Each porcelain bowl, each jade plate, each bronze vessel would shimmer under the soft light filtering in from high windows, or from the gentle glow of strategically placed oil lamps, illuminating the vibrant colors and delicate textures of the food. Around the periphery of the room, standing utterly still, would be the eunuchs, guards, and palace attendants, their eyes fixed on the central drama, their breaths held. At the focal point of this tense tableau stood the royal spoon taster. Hands, though perhaps trembling imperceptibly from the immense pressure, would move with practiced deliberation. Their tools were simple, yet imbued with centuries of superstition and practical application. Often, they used silver chopsticks or spoons, as silver was widely believed to tarnish or change color in the presence of certain common poisons, particularly those containing sulfur compounds like arsenic sulfide. A subtle darkening or blackening of the silver would be an immediate, undeniable alarm. Beyond silver, other materials were sometimes favored for their purported anti-poison properties, such as jade, believed by some to crack or change hue, or even rhinoceros horn, which was thought to froth or react to toxins. However, the most reliable tool remained the spoon taster's own honed senses and unwavering concentration. The utensil itself was merely an aid. The ultimate filter was the human body. The tasting ritual was meticulously ritualized, a precise choreography of survival. It rarely involved a single large bite. Rather, it was a methodical dish-by-dish assessment, beginning with the lightest, least complex dishes and progressing to the heavier, more flavorful ones. For each of the dozens of dishes presented, the spoon taster would take an incredibly small, almost imperceptible portion. A tiny sliver of vegetable, a single grain of rice, a delicate drop of soup, a minuscule fragment of meat. This was not a tasting for culinary quality, but for absolute safety. Their sensory examination began long before the food touched their tongue. First, visual inspection was paramount. They would scrutinize the dish for any abnormal discoloration, an unusual sheen on the surface, any strange precipitates or particulate matter that shouldn't be there, or any subtle deviation from the expected appearance of that particular dish. Was the color of the broth too murky? Did the vegetables retain their natural vibrancy, or did they appear dulled or oddly translucent? Was there an unnatural foam or film? Even minute changes, invisible to the untrained eye, could signal danger. Next came the olfactory test. They would gently bring the portion close to their nose, inhaling deeply, searching for any unusual or acrid aroma that might betray a hidden contaminant. Poisons like arsenic, particularly in certain forms, could sometimes emit a faint telltale, garlic-like odor. Mercury compounds might have a subtle metallic tang. Other plant-based toxins might possess a bitter, earthy, or even sickeningly sweet smell that did not belong to the natural ingredients. This required an exceptionally keen sense of smell, trained to differentiate the subtle nuances of hundreds of ingredients and spices. Only then, after meticulous visual and olfactory scrutiny, would the tiniest portion of the dish touch their tongue. This was the moment of ultimate vulnerability, the silent judgment of the gustatory sense. They would roll the morsel around their mouth, not swallowing immediately, but concentrating intensely on the immediate taste, the aftertaste, and any strange physical sensations. Was there an unusual bitterness, an acrid burning sensation, a sudden metallic tang, or a strange numbness or tingling on the tongue, gums, or lips? Did the expected flavors seem dulled, distorted, or replaced by an unnatural chemical taste? This required a highly refined palate, able to detect the most minute deviations. The challenge was immense, as many potent poisons are tasteless or nearly so, meaning their reliance couldn't be solely on taste. After tasting each minuscule portion, the spoon taster would typically wait, often for a period of several agonizing minutes, before proceeding to the next dish. This wait time was crucial, a silent acknowledgement of the terrifying reality of fast-acting poisons. Their internal clock would be ticking, each second stretching into an eternity. During this suspenseful interlude, their body became the ultimate, final testing ground. They would be acutely aware of every single internal sensation, a sudden dizzy spell, a strange warmth spreading through the limbs, a tightening in the chest, a sudden wave of nausea, an unexpected tremor in their hands, or a subtle change in their heart rate. This physical self-monitoring was relentless, a constant hyper-awareness of their own physiological responses. The types of poisons known and feared in dynastic China were varied, ranging from naturally occurring minerals to potent plant extracts. Arsenic, particularly arsenic trioxide, known as pai shuang, was one of the most common and feared, largely due to its availability and its often delayed but agonizing symptoms. A spoon taster would be looking for its subtle, sometimes garlic-like odor and its capacity to induce severe gastrointestinal distress, violent vomiting, excruciating abdominal pain, and profuse diarrhea, usually within minutes to hours, depending on the dose and type. Mercury compounds were another insidious threat, though often slower acting, causing tremors, neurological damage, and severe organ failure over time. Plant-based toxins were equally dangerous and perhaps harder to detect. These could include potent alkaloids from plants like aconite or wolfsbane, which caused rapid heart failure and neurological symptoms, or other botanical poisons that might induce paralysis, convulsions, or a gradual weakening of the body. The greatest fear was of those poisons that were genuinely tasteless and colorless, or those designed for a delayed action, meant to take effect hours after consumption, long after the taster might have given the all clear. These were the true nightmares, the ones that could bypass even the most vigilant spoon taster, leaving them to collapse only after the emperor had consumed the fatal meal. The spoon taster's entire experience was overshadowed by immense psychological pressure. Their role was a daily, terrifying lottery where the prize for success was merely continued existence, and the cost of failure was guaranteed, agonizing death. They lived in a constant, gnawing awareness of their own mortality. Every meal was a potential execution. The solitude of their duty was absolute. They could confide in no one about the true burden they carried. They were privy to the most intimate and dangerous secret of the court, the perpetual vulnerability of the emperor. This knowledge isolated them, even from their fellow eunuchs or servants. How could one form a true bond with someone whose life might suddenly end at any moment, and whose death would invariably signal a cascade of terrible events? Their internal state was likely one of chronic anxiety, perhaps manifested in restless sleep, vivid nightmares, or a pervasive sense of dread. They might have developed their own quiet coping mechanisms, ritualistic prayers, silent meditations, a stoic acceptance of their fate, or simply a rigid adherence to their duty as a means of control in an otherwise uncontrollable situation. Their mind would be a perpetual checklist of poison symptoms, a mental rehearsal of bodily reactions, a constant vigilance over their own internal state. The physical sensations of anxiety would be their daily companions, a racing heart, cold sweat that broke out despite the palace warmth, a persistent dry mouth, and a pervasive tremor beneath the... If tragically, poison was detected or even strongly suspected, the response protocol was immediate, precise, and utterly ruthless. The spoon taster's action would be swift and decisive, a prearranged, often silent signal, perhaps a sharp gasp, a sudden slump, or a specific predetermined gesture to a nearby eunuch or guard. The moment this signal was given, chaos, contained and controlled, would erupt. Guards who were always present, though often subtly positioned, would immediately spring into action, their movements swift and practiced. The emperor would be secured, perhaps rushed from the dining chamber to a safer location, or surrounded by a phalanx of bodyguards. The dining chamber would be instantly sealed, all exits blocked. Every eunuch, servant, and guard present would be immediately detained. The focus would then shift to identifying the poisoner. The very cooks who prepared the meal, the eunuchs who transported it, and any individuals who had come into contact with the food during its journey would face immediate and brutal interrogation. This was an age where torture was a common and accepted method of extracting confessions. The goal was not merely to find the individual who administered the poison, but to uncover the entire conspiracy, to identify the mastermind behind the assassination attempt, whether it be a rival faction, a disgruntled minister, or a jealous imperial relative. Confessions, often extracted under duress, would lead to swift and brutal justice, execution for all involved, often for their entire family lines, a terrifying deterrent. And what of the spoon taster themselves? If they successfully detected the poison and alerted the court, their immediate fate was still dire. They would likely succumb to the toxin themselves, their sacrifice a grim testament to their duty. There might be frantic attempts by imperial physicians to administer antidotes, but often, given the nature of the poisons and the rudimentary medical knowledge, these efforts were futile. Their death, though heroic in its context, would be swift and agonizing. However, their demise would be recorded as a noble sacrifice, perhaps earning their distant family a small imperial recognition or pension, a cold comfort for their ultimate price. Their body would be meticulously examined to confirm the presence and type of poison, a final morbid confirmation of their astute detection. Their death would be the proof of their success, a silent, yet horrifying, affirmation of their vital role. If by some miracle, the spoon taster survived the poisoning, perhaps having ingested only a minute, non-lethal dose, their life would be forever changed. They might suffer chronic health issues from the lingering effects of the toxin, or be forced into a premature, quiet retirement, perpetually haunted by their brush with death. They would be a living ghost, a constant reminder of the ever-present danger within the palace. However, the more common outcome, and the one that brought silent relief, was the absence of poison. After the agonizing wait period following the tasting of each dish, if no adverse reactions occurred, the spoon taster would offer a subtle, almost imperceptible nod or a specific deferential gesture to the attending chief eunuch or chamberlain. This quiet signal was the all clear. It was the culmination of their daily perilous duty, confirmed by the continued normal functioning of their own body. Upon receiving this signal, the chief eunuch would then formally present the dishes to the emperor. For the spoon taster, this all-clear moment was a profound, silent sigh of relief. The emperor would then proceed with his meal, often with a casual, almost indifferent air, perhaps offering a brief, almost imperceptible nod in the spoon taster's direction, a silent acknowledgement of trust and continued service. For the spoon taster, it was not a moment of grand applause or public celebration. Their success was entirely defined by the absence of drama, the quiet, uneventful continuation of the imperial meal. After the meal concluded, and the emperor retired, the spoon taster would withdraw, their immediate duty fulfilled. But the lingering, physical and mental after-effects of the stress would remain. Their senses would still be heightened, their nerves frayed. They would likely return to their humble quarters, a space often devoid of the luxuries of the inner court, a stark contrast to the opulence they had just guarded. This routine would repeat itself multiple times a day, for every meal, every snack, every drink consumed by the emperor. The monotony of safety, the endless repetition of quiet vigilance, broken only by the terrifying possibility of immediate death, was their silent burden. They were rarely celebrated for their daily successes, only remembered grimly in the rare event of their failure and sacrifice. This daily reality encapsulates the central, unassuming paradox of their role. The spoon taster held arguably the single most critical life or death responsibility in the entire imperial court. The very survival of the Son of Heaven often resting squarely on their individual senses. Yet, they existed in a state of profound anonymity and low social standing. They were a tool, a human shield, deemed expendable yet utterly indispensable. Their existence highlighted the vast chasm between the visible splendor and power of the imperial court and the unseen, dangerous sacrifices made by those who maintained its stability. They belonged to a class of individuals whose lives were valued not for their intrinsic worth, but for their utility in serving the imperial will. Their relationships within the palace would have been complex. They were subordinate to powerful eunuchs who often commanded vast influence and controlled much of the inner court's operations. While they worked alongside cooks and other servants, their unique, dangerous role likely set them apart, fostering a sense of isolation. True friendships would have been difficult to cultivate. Who would genuinely befriend someone whose primary purpose was to die if danger arose? Their few trusted contacts, if any, would likely be fellow lower-ranking eunuchs or servants equally. Trapped by the palace's rigid systems, they lived a life of quiet self-containment. Their hours between meals perhaps filled with simple personal tasks, meditation, or perhaps a quiet pursuit like calligraphy or reading. If they were literate, their only true solace, after years of this perilous service, would be the distant hope of a modest pension or a quiet retirement granted to their family, a small recompense for a lifetime spent on the edge of oblivion. The silent scrutiny of the spoon taster, the methodical ritual of tasting, the agonizing wait, and the immediate, terrifying consequences of detection or failure, all painted a vivid picture of the profound isolation and constant danger inherent in holding supreme power in imperial China. Their unassuming presence, a constant shadow at the imperial table, was a chilling reminder that even the divine Son of Heaven was, at his most basic level, a mortal man, susceptible to the most insidious of human betrayals. What broader implications did this unique role have beyond the dining chamber? How did the existence of the spoon taster reflect the nature of imperial power itself? And what echoes of their silent watch can we find in our modern world? Section 3. Beyond the plate, the broader implications and enduring legacy. Having now thoroughly explored the rigorous selection process, the immense psychological burden, and the agonizing moment-by-moment ritual of the royal spoon taster, witnessing their silent judgment and the immediate, terrifying consequences of their findings, our journey leads us outward. We must now turn our gaze beyond the gilded confines of the imperial dining chamber to understand the far-reaching implications of this peculiar role. This final section seeks to unravel its intricate historical context within the sprawling, often ruthless, tapestry of dynastic rule, drawing extensive comparisons to similar figures in other powerful civilizations across the globe, and contemplating the quiet, profound, and often unacknowledged legacy of these unassuming individuals, whose lives were perpetually poised on the edge of a poisoned blade. Their story is not merely one of personal peril and quiet heroism. It is a vivid, microcosmic window into the very nature of absolute power, the pervasive, almost palpable fear that often accompanied it, and the elaborate, deeply human systems devised to sustain such power in the face of constant, unseen threats. The very existence of the royal spoon taster, a figure so intrinsically and intimately linked to the daily survival of the Son of Heaven, was a stark, tangible, and chilling manifestation of the pervasive paranoia that gripped virtually every Chinese imperial court throughout its long history. This deep-seated fear of poison was not a mere fanciful notion born of overactive imaginations or isolated incidents. It was fundamentally rooted in the sanguinary, often brutal, realities of dynastic politics and palace intrigue. Throughout the entire sweep of Chinese history, from the tumultuous Warring States period, marked by ceaseless conflict and cunning stratagems. Through the glorious Tang and the prosperous Song, to the formidable Ming and the ultimate, multi-ethnic Qing dynasty, poison was a common, insidious, and frequently preferred weapon in the endless, often clandestine, struggle for ultimate power. Consider the sheer variety of plots and factions that made poison such a potent tool. Within the highly insulated walls of the palace, rival imperial consorts might resort to poison to eliminate competitors for the emperor's affection, or more critically, to remove obstacles to their own son's succession to the throne. Ambitious empress dowagers, often wielding immense power behind the scenes, might use it to remove inconvenient young emperors or challenge the authority of formidable ministers. Disgruntled scholar officials, frustrated by perceived injustices or blocked ambitions, might seek subtle, untraceable revenge against powerful eunuchs or corrupt grand secretaries. Rebellious princes or ambitious provincial warlords, while usually operating on a larger scale, might also attempt to destabilize the central government by striking at its very head through a well-placed toxin. Imperial assassinations, whether successful or ultimately thwarted, were tragically common throughout history, and poison offered a clandestine, seemingly untraceable method compared to overt violence or direct confrontation, which carried immediate risks of capture and failure. The sudden, inexplicable illness of an emperor, followed by his swift and agonizing demise, frequently pointed to the silent, undetectable work of a hidden toxin, leaving behind a wake of suspicion, purges, and often bloody power vacuums. Thus, the spoon taster was not merely guarding against a hypothetical or occasional threat. They were a direct, daily response to a very real, very present, and deeply historical danger that had time and again reshaped dynastic lines and plunged vast empires into chaos and civil war. Their constant presence was a testament to the enduring instability at the very apex of Chinese imperial power. The spoon taster's role also served to powerfully highlight the profound and often crushing isolation of the emperor himself. Despite wielding virtually absolute power over millions of subjects and being constantly surrounded by thousands of courtiers, ministers, concubines, and servants, the Son of Heaven often existed in a splendid yet terribly solitary gilded cage. Whom could he truly trust when every smiling face could potentially mask a treacherous heart, and every seemingly innocuous dish, prepared by skilled hands, could conceal a deadly payload? The spoon taster, though often low in social status and treated as a mere tool, became one of the incredibly few individuals who possessed a direct, existential, and utterly personal link to the emperor's immediate survival. Their daily affirmation of safety was a necessary, though perhaps psychologically distressing, reassurance. It reminded the emperor, in a visceral way, of his constant, terrifying vulnerability, even amidst all his might, his divine mandate, and his unparalleled security apparatus. This absolute dependence on another human being for the most fundamental act of survival, the intake of sustenance, underscored the immense and lonely burden of supreme power. It was a daily reminder that even the Son of Heaven was, at his core, a mortal man, susceptible to the most insidious forms of human malice. Throughout the long, multifaceted centuries of imperial China, the general function and terrifying purpose of the spoon taster remained largely consistent, a testament to the enduring nature of the threat of poison. However, there might have been subtle evolution and variations across different dynasties and time periods. For instance, during periods of heightened political instability, such as the tumultuous final years of a dynasty or moments of intense factionalism within the court, the role might have become even more formalized with stricter protocols, increased numbers of tasters, and even more rigorous vetting processes. In contrast, during more stable eras, particularly under strong and confident emperors, the practice might have been slightly less visible, perhaps relegated to a more discreet ritual, though it was almost certainly never entirely abandoned. The specific materials used for testing, like the choice between silver or jade utensils, might also have varied based on local availability of materials, evolving beliefs about their efficacy against specific poisons or the particular known toxins prevalent in certain regions or periods. While the Chinese tradition often assigned this critical role to eunuchs or trusted personal servants, sometimes individuals of very low birth, due to their perceived unwavering loyalty, often enforced by fear of family retribution, and their lack of external ties or political ambition. This approach contrasted interestingly with practices in other powerful empires across the world. Let us now cast our gaze across continents and civilizations to draw compelling cross-cultural comparisons. In the ancient Roman Empire, for example, emperors also harbored a profound and justified fear of poisoning, and the role of a pregustator, meaning one who tastes before, was well established. Emperors like Tiberius and most famously Claudius were reportedly consumed by paranoia regarding poison. Historical accounts, though sometimes embellished, frequently mention their reliance on tasters. However, the Roman pregustators were often slaves, sometimes freedmen, and while their role was undeniably vital to the emperor's immediate safety, it typically didn't possess the same rigid, almost bureaucratic formality or the multi-layered security protocols that characterized the Chinese system. It was less of a formalized office and more of a practical necessity. Roman dining culture, with its elaborate banquets and often public display of power, meant that tasting might have been a more visible, albeit terrifying, demonstration for the assembled guests. The specific poisons feared in Rome often derived from sophisticated Greek or Egyptian knowledge, included substances like hemlock, wolfsbane, aconite, and various arsenic compounds. Moving westward into the intricate courts of medieval and early modern European monarchies, the fear of poison was equally real and frequently employed in the dark arts of courtly intrigue. Roles akin to the spoon taster, such as the king's cupbearer or chief taster, existed in realms like France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire. What is fascinatingly different here is the social standing of these individuals. Unlike their often low-status Chinese counterparts, these European tasters were frequently high-ranking noblemen or trusted knights. Their appointment to such a perilous position was considered an immense honor, a testament to the monarch's absolute trust in their loyalty and courage. This higher status profoundly changed the dynamic. It was a dangerous duty, yes, but also a mark of immense favor and privilege. These European tasters often performed their duty publicly, dramatically sipping from the king's cup or taking a morsel from his plate as a visible, performative sign of loyalty and a guarantee of safety for the assembled court. While they faced the same mortal danger, their inherent aristocratic status imbued the role with a different kind of prestige and cultural significance, even if that prestige was constantly tinged with the icy certainty of mortal risk. This contrasted sharply with the Chinese spoon taster, whose effectiveness often stemmed from their unassuming and often anonymous position, a human buffer in a system built on suspicion. The types of threats also varied. European courts might face more individual assassination attempts, driven by specific rivalries between noble houses or kingdoms, rather than the systemic deep-seated factionalism often seen within the sprawling Chinese bureaucracy. The European practice sometimes shifted from tasting food to primarily tasting wine, as wine was an incredibly common, often preferred, vehicle for administering poison due to its strong flavors and widespread consumption. At banquets, similar extensive precautions against poisoning could also be found in other vast, absolute empires. In the Ottoman Empire, for instance, the Sultan's personal safety was paramount. While not always a specific spoon taster role, various trusted palace officials, often including the Kavesibaka, chief coffee maker, or specially appointed Kesnesabaka, chief taster, were responsible for overseeing the preparation and tasting of the Sultan's food and beverages. The elaborate kitchens of the Topkapi Palace operated under strict security, with multiple layers of eunuchs and the elite Janissary guards ensuring no tampering occurred. Similarly, in the Mughal Empire of India, the Khansama, chief steward or head of the kitchen, held immense responsibility for the royal household's provisions, including overseeing food safety and often delegating tasting duties to trusted subordinates. This cultural blend of Persian and Indian influences in court cuisine and practice meant a sophisticated, albeit often less documented, system of food vigilance. The sheer universality of this phenomenon, the desperate need for a dedicated food taster for an absolute ruler across such diverse cultures underscores a common thread: the fundamental, pervasive human fear of betrayal, and the deep vulnerability of those at the pinnacle of power. Beyond practical detection and protection, the spoon taster's role was profoundly imbued with symbolism and served as a powerful psychological deterrent. Their very presence was not merely a physical shield, but a chilling psychological weapon aimed directly at anyone contemplating poisoning the emperor. It sent a clear, unambiguous, and terrifying message: your insidious efforts will almost certainly be detected, and your treachery will be met with swift, brutal, and inescapable retribution, often for your entire lineage. The taster, in essence, became a living anti-talisman against malevolent intent, a human early warning system, and a desperate final buffer designed to absorb the first fatal blow. This served not only to protect the emperor physically, but also to project an image of impregnable security and meticulous foresight, aimed squarely at discouraging potential assassins from even attempting such a deed. The silent, watchful spoon taster was a constant, unsettling reminder of the imperial regime's absolute, pervasive control, extending even over the most basic and intimate of human needs, the act of eating. This subtle psychological display of power was arguably as crucial as the physical protection they offered, shaping the very atmosphere of the court. The constant, looming threat of poison and the ubiquitous presence of the spoon taster inevitably influenced broader court culture, dining etiquette, and even interpersonal dynamics. Courtiers would have been acutely aware of the scrutiny surrounding imperial meals. One might avoid offering certain dishes, or hesitate to accept food gifts, or engage in elaborate displays of tasting one's own food first before offering it. Suspicion could easily fall upon anyone in the proximity of the food. This fostered a pervasive atmosphere of caution and ritualized performance of loyalty, where every gesture and interaction around the imperial table was laden with potential meaning and hidden danger. The decline of the formal, human royal spoon taster role was a gradual process, intimately linked to profound broader historical shifts both within China and globally. Internally, as some Chinese dynasties weakened and central imperial control began to erode, particularly in their later periods, the elaborate and resource-intensive palace security systems, including the meticulous food protocols, might have become less rigorously enforced or even succumb to corruption. Furthermore, new and different forms of threat, such as widespread rebellions from outside the palace walls or overwhelming external invasions, often superseded the internal fear of poisoning, shifting the focus of imperial security to more overt military concerns. More universally, several external factors played a decisive role in rendering the human spoon taster obsolete. The advancements in chemistry and toxicology, particularly as the world moved into the scientific Enlightenment and then the transformative 19th century, were paramount. Scientific understanding of poisons evolved dramatically. Detection moved from reliance on unreliable human senses or superstitious beliefs about silver changing color, to rudimentary chemical tests in dedicated laboratories, and eventually to highly sophisticated analytical equipment. The ability to identify specific toxins in tiny quantities through scientific analysis, rather than a human biological response, revolutionized food safety. Furthermore, changes in governance systems played a crucial part. The gradual decline of absolute monarchies and the rise of more constitutional governments, republics, and parliamentary democracies shifted the nature of political threats and security. While leaders still faced dangers, the specific kind of internal, insidious poisoning plot often associated with highly centralized, personalistic imperial courts became less common. The nature of power changed, and so did the nature of its protection. Advent of new assassination methods also rendered the spoon taster less uniquely potent. The development of firearms, more sophisticated explosives, and different forms of political violence, such as public assassinations, mass purges, or widespread political terror, meant that poisoning food, while still possible, was no longer the primary or most feared method of eliminating a leader. The focus of security shifted to broader, more complex protective measures. Finally, the rise of public health movements in the 19th century, driven by discoveries like germ theory, fundamentally altered society's understanding of contamination and safety. This led to a focus on widespread food safety for the general populace through sanitation, refrigeration, and large-scale public health infrastructure. In this new paradigm, the idea of a single human taster for one individual seemed archaic and inefficient compared to systemic, scientifically grounded approaches to ensure food safety for an entire population. Despite its eventual obsolescence, the historical role of the royal spoon taster leaves subtle yet profound echoes in our contemporary world. The fundamental concern for the safety of food consumption remains absolutely paramount, though the methods have undergone a revolutionary transformation. We no longer rely on the heroic, life-threatening actions of a single individual. Instead, we have developed incredibly sophisticated, vast-scale systems of modern food safety standards. This includes elaborate traceability systems that track food from farm to fork, comprehensive hazard analysis and critical control points, HACCP, systems that identify and mitigate potential dangers at every stage of food production. The vital role of government agencies like the FDA in the United States or EFSA in Europe in regulating food safety, and advanced allergen management protocols in commercial kitchens worldwide. The sheer scale of modern food production and global distribution makes the concept of a single human taster for systemic safety utterly impossible. Yet, the spirit of ensuring food is safe for consumption, of rigorous vigilance against unseen threats, persists and has been institutionalized on an unprecedented scale. Furthermore, the general concept of taste testing continues to exist, albeit for entirely different, non-lethal purposes. Professionals in the culinary world, from expert sommeliers evaluating wine to master blenders crafting the perfect tea or coffee, possess highly refined palates and senses. Their meticulous sensory analysis, while certainly not life-threatening, directly mirrors the spoon taster's disciplined and focused use of their senses, highlighting the enduring human capacity to extract incredibly detailed information through taste and smell, albeit now for quality rather than mortal danger, even in the realm of high-level VIP security for world leaders today. While human tasters are largely, if not entirely, a thing of the past in most major nations, the principle of ensuring a leader's food is absolutely safe remains a critical concern. This is now handled through an incredibly multi-layered, technologically advanced security apparatus, dedicated, thoroughly vetted chefs working in highly secure kitchens, food ingredients sourced only from trusted, audited suppliers, armed guards overseeing the transport of prepared meals, and crucially, private, sterile laboratories where advanced biochemical testing of every single dish is performed using rapid testing kits and sophisticated analytical equipment before it is ever served. This technological shift represents the pinnacle of modern science applied to an ancient fear, replacing the slow, dangerous, subjective human taster with the speed, precision, and objectivity of scientific instruments. Yet, despite all the layers, of technology and bureaucracy, an element of human trust still fundamentally underpins these systems. Trust in the integrity of the vetted chef, the honesty of the supplier, the competence of the lab technician. This subtle human element connects back to the spoon taster's fundamental role. At its heart, it was always about one human being relying on another for their very survival. In quiet, final reflection, the story of the royal spoon taster is a profoundly poignant reminder of the myriad unseen sacrifices that have often underpinned vast power structures and sustained historical stability throughout human civilization. These were individuals whose entire lives were defined by a perpetual, intimate proximity to mortal danger, whose countless successes went largely uncelebrated and unrecorded in the annals of history, and whose ultimate tragic failure invariably meant a gruesome, agonizing death, often with devastating consequences for their families and the empire they served. Their quiet courage, their unwavering focus amidst unimaginable pressure, and their profound isolation in a world of opulence speak volumes about the human capacity for extraordinary duty and the often brutal realities inherent in imperial governance. They were living symbols of the inherent dangers of absolute rule, a constant silent reminder that even the divine Son of Heaven, supposedly protected by heavenly mandate, was at his most basic level, a mortal man, terrifyingly susceptible to the most insidious forms of human malice and betrayal. The spoon taster's unassuming role, though centuries removed from our modern world of scientific certainty and widespread food safety regulations, offers a truly fascinating, unsettling glimpse into a past where trust was an incredibly fragile commodity and survival often hinged entirely on the keen senses and quiet, unacknowledged bravery of a single solitary individual. It is a story not of grand battles or sweeping political reforms, but of the minute, often overlooked, daily rituals that, piece by agonizing piece, shape the destinies of empires and preserve the lives of their rulers. And perhaps, as the night deepens around us and the whispers of history grow faint, we can find a strange, quiet comfort in the silent, tireless watch of those who stood, often alone, between an emperor and the terrifying shadow of the unseen. Their history, though seemingly mundane in its daily repetition, is a profound testament to vigilance, quiet sacrifice, and the enduring human need for safety, even in the most perilous and powerful of circumstances.